let's talk about the rebel movement, in particular your relationship with it. I just, as a caveat, as someone who covered it as a reporter, it was extremely difficult for an outsider such as myself to make contact with any. I think there were four major rebel movements in Guatemala, unlike El Salvador, where we traveled with any of the groups of the FMLN almost weekly. That was not possible in Guatemala unless you went to Mexico and tried to set it up, but it took weeks, if not months. But you managed to get to at least once into, were you in Atitlan? I can't remember.
No, it's in
But talk.
Volcano, Tajmulco.
Okay, I want you to talk a little bit about that, and then talk about a little bit about your husband.
Okay. You want me to tell you what it was like up in the frente? It was it.
I want you to, yeah, I want you to talk about, because not many outsiders got up there, as I remember. I mean,
No, not many got
not
up
many,
there.
and I think it took you quite a while.
It took me a really long time.
Right?
They knew me because if someone had been tortured and had black rings around their wrists, and people knew they could go to my hotel room and we'd figure something out. I'd find some way to get with the Canadian embassy and out they'd go. No questions asked. I figured if they're in danger of torture or they've already been tortured, that's enough for me. And, I didn't blab their secrets. And when I got back to the United States, after 2 years down there, it was impossible to just not think about it anymore. And it was still called the silent Holocaust because, as you know, it was impossible for journalists to really get stuff published. I had many people ask us for
Yeah.
notes and everything, and they'd get told, no one's interested, story denied. But that's how I ended up getting up there after many years. I'd been working on Bridge of Courage, which is just short vignettes about different people I knew who I found out were in the guerrilla movement, and people would tell me their stories, and one would just stay with me, and I started writing all those down. And those are in the book, but I wanted to interview women indigenous combatants, not in some clinic in Mexico or Spain. I wanted to see what it was like up there in actual real time, in action. So they thought about it for a really long time, and then they said, "Okay, it's been quiet up where the radio is, the Voz Popular, up in
This is the clandestine rebel radio station.
yeah." There'd been nonstop combat for quite a while, but that had got combat going into that volcano. They decided it couldn't be worth it, right? Although,
But I just want to, as in El Salvador, the rebel radio station, which was called Radio Ensaremos, it drove the military crazy, as it did in Guatemala. They were constantly trying to search for it. I don't think they ever got it in Guatemala,
no,
and they didn't get it in El Salvador. In fact, the FMLN set up a fake radio station, and this famous General Monterosa went up on his helicopter and gleefully loaded what he thought was all the radio equipment onto his helicopter, but it was a bomb, and they all blew up, and he was killed. But we listened to it religiously in El Salvador, especially the radio dramas, which were hilarious. But these are important elements. Anyway, it's a digression, but Guatemala also had a radio station,
and it had a
a
whole lot
rebel
of
radio
good
station.
public education stuff in there too, plus real news. So
Yeah.
people did tune in, and they bombed all over the place, but they stopped actually going up if they could avoid it with foot soldiers. So they said, all right, it's quieter. You may be in a bombing, but you can go. We'll give you 30 days to interview people, and then that's it. Down you go. So I did get dumped off at the foot of the volcano at an agreed upon spot. And I remember, it was like a very light pack and stuff. And I remember someone saying, okay, 10 minutes, put on your black sweater. So I did. And then it was like 5 minutes, take off your shoes. And then it's like 2 minutes, lace your boots. And it's like, it's making me kind of nervous. But then it was like, we're here in a campesino that I would not for the world have thought twice of lugging bags of oranges, like pulled my car door open and said the code word, and I said mine back, and he hauled me right out of the car and took off into the bushes with me, pulled a rifle out, and hauled me onto the trail, and we ran most of the night. We reunited with a group of four, just straight up the volcano. And they were so professional. They knew exactly how to do it. It was all arranged. Needless to say, I don't exactly look like a villager from the San Marcos area, but they took me right straight up. And they knew it was safer. They wouldn't have let me up. And so it was. They told me to get physically prepared, and I had done that. So it was an all night kind of trot, and I was pretty freaked out by the time we got there. But it was
Let me
stuff.
just interrupt you, Jennifer. I also had that experience of having to walk during the night and sleep during the day. It's because of the helicopters.
Yeah.
So that's why oftentimes when I moved with rebel units in El Salvador, we walked at night.
It just, there was no other way. We did, in fact, go right through a village, and everybody was, coming to talk to us. And I mean, it was friendly. But after a certain line, there were no more villages for a very long way. Um, and I'm only comfortable talking about that village because it's been so long now. It's been 30 years, more than 30 years. Uh, but once I got there, I just started going around meeting with different people. The commander of that, Luis Frente, was Everardo, who eventually became my husband, as you know. He was the commander of that whole region and was very busy, going from, post to post, checking in on everything. Came up, talked to me briefly, make sure that I had what I needed, and then introduced me to the first person who became a very close friend, Emma. And I started taking histories, and that was like I'd go spend time with the people husking corn, and then I'd go spend time with the people at the cauldrons or chopping wood, and I tried to help chop wood and do what I could too. I spent some time with the physician, um, but just I stopped and listened. But it was almost all indigenous, and it was really striking at nightfall because everybody would come in from their duties, not the post, of course. Guard duty had to stay out there. Um, but they would all come in from their duties, and they'd all sit around the campfire, and they just loved each other, right? I mean, that's what kept everybody going. Everybody was indigenous brothers and sisters. There were Latinos that had come up, like a friend of mine that I mentioned to you earlier. I mean, if they couldn't stay in the city, up they went, or they could go to Mexico. It was their choice, or go to the United States. But the great majority of the combatants were indigenous.
I just want to stop you. This was known as the ORPA.
Yes,
It was 90% indigenous. It was founded by the son of the Guatemala's only Nobel Prize
Miguel
winning
Angel
author.
Azuelas. Yeah, it was
And I just throw that out, having spent so many years in Latin America.
the,
And I think that's, a really key point about the ORPA is that they did not buy into the quote unquote FOCO theory peddled by Che Guevara, which was a myth. That's not how, that's a small band of armed radicals that begin to carry out actions, and that is the nucleus of a revolution. They spent years and years organizing among indigenous communities to build a base. It was the completely, and the FOCO theory, of course, is what got Che killed in Bolivia. But they quite astutely realized that didn't work, and that's why they were so powerful, and that's why the genocidal campaign waged against them was primarily waged against their civilian support. Is that correct?
certainly, I mean, the scorched earth campaign was horrible, and it was against their base of support. I mean, if you ever got caught with a can of soup, you shouldn't have. God help you. Um, I'll get back to Everardo in a minute because his story is exactly that story of the 7 years of organizing in secret and the son of the Nobel Prize winner and all of that. I don't know the full statistics of exactly how many in Luis Ixmatá were indigenous. All I can say is there's definitely no Russian being spoken at the campfire, and I didn't hear any Cuban accents either. It was Cachiquel, Tzutuil, Quiche, and Mam that I heard the most. Everardo spoke Mam, the leading official, but also other languages, and he spoke Spanish, spoke and understood Spanish. Most people had enough Spanish that they could go back and forth with each other, because a Tzutuil person maybe couldn't talk to a Mam person, right? So there had to be a common denominator. what I really liked is the way the women combatants were treated. They were young, and they had come up, they knew exactly what they were in the mountains for, and why they were there, and what they needed to do. They were disciplined. They knew everything they were doing. They could tell you what the doctrines were, et cetera, et cetera. But then you'd talk to them just sort of in private, just hanging out, and it would be a very personal story, and you'd realize this person is really a very young woman, right? She'd be anxious about having a baby later, or what her mother was doing, and those were some of the stories that ended up in Bridge of Courage. But I saw a group of the women go out on an all-woman mission in the middle of the night, and there was no joking around. No one was talking personal stuff. They knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, we had. I don't know if you did in Guatemala. We had combatants in the rebel movement in El Salvador, women.
I
Lydia
don't,
Diaz.
I don't think that happened. They were working, and I'll get back to this later. They were working very hard to have high-level indigenous leaders like my husband Everardo. But the fatality rate, let's just say, was extremely high.
Right.